Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here, and my guest today is John, the owner of Dystopic Fibre yarns. Welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Well, explain me the name. Tell me how you came up with this name.
So the name, I started dyeing yarn in October of 2020. So this is the height of lockdown at this point in the UK, as I'm sure it is for nearly everyone at that point. And it's a bit of a use on the word dystopian. I take a lot of inspiration from science fiction and fantasy, and dystopian narratives are a lot of those kinds of stories that I gravitate towards. Societies in which everything may look kind of functional and almost idyllic, but actually something is wrong. And to reference that at a time in which none of us have really experienced a kind of global pandemic on that level, there was clearly something wrong at that moment. But it's conveniently a reference to science fiction stories that I love to take reference from. So it's an interesting word. It's an archaic use of dystopian, but I love it. It just fit for me at the time.
Well, tell me about what made you go into dyeing yarn.
I started to knit in 2019. I taught myself to knit just through YouTube tutorials. I'm sure the kinds of YouTube channels that we've all seen and watched and rely on. And after I started knitting, I very quickly was introduced into the world of indie dyed yarn. And I loved the product. I loved buying it. And actually, very quickly, I realized that I wanted to own another part of the process. And I wanted to create colorways of my own that I enjoyed, that different dyers were referencing films and TV and books that they really enjoyed. And I, in my head, thought, wouldn't it be great if I had a yarn based off of this thing that I love, or this place that I've been, or this concept that I enjoy? So that was kind of an early thought, and it was actually the reason that I started dyeing yarn eventually in October of 2020 is I actually had a bit of an experience the month before, where I fell in a canal and almost drowned. And it was that experience of thinking, I could die tomorrow, just like any of us could. And it was that pivotal moment that actually gave me the kind of the decision making skill to go, now is the time. I'm not going to wait any longer. And so the very next month in October is when I went for it.
Well, tell me about the first skein. How did that go? How did you figure out what to use? Were you satisfied with the end result?
Yeah, so the first games, I can look back and I can probably get you some pictures to look at what some of my first games looked like, because I took a lot of photographs at the time. I think from what I remember, it was a lot of bright color. And when I bought all of the dye stock in, I think really I just wanted to see how they worked and how they played together. So I think it was just a lot of throwing dyes in the pan, throwing yarn on top of it, and seeing how it worked. I think I went through a lot of rain. I went through a bit of a rainbow phase. I just went through kind of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. And so there was definitely a rainbow phase of my dyeing, and it was an exercise. It was an exercise in understanding how the dye worked and how the yarn worked. So it will have been a lot of tonal colors, and it will have been some variegated tones, but very experimental. I would say it took me quite a while to get to the point where I realized that there was a focus or a specific family of color that I enjoyed. And I actually think it was maybe within my first few months of dyeing, maybe like three or four, that I made a small collection based on mushrooms. And there were some brown tones, there was some purple in there, and it was mixed in with some greens and some pinks. And for some reason, that small collection stuck with me. And researching those different mushroom species was so interesting and fascinating. And I realized actually that there's such a color range in mushroom and fungi species. And after I had that small collection, I moved on again into, I think, fairy tales and into movies and films and maybe rainbows again. That kind of comes back quite often. But I think maybe a year after that initial collection, I came back to mushrooms because it was the inspiration that I just kept thinking about, and more ideas were coming without even really meaning for them to, and I just couldn't ignore it anymore. And so mushrooms and fungi is where I ended up focusing. And so eventually, once I was happy and confident with the brand and the concept, I had my logo made, which is the logo that I present to everyone today. And it's of a kind of mushroom headed body person. It's kind of non-gendered, non-specific, but I wanted it to look odd. I think the brief I gave my designer that I worked with was odd but pretty. And I think I'm quite pleased with how it turned out. They've kind of got their hands out and they're offering a kind of skein of yarn. And I just said, listen, I want a mushroom on a person's head, and I want plants and mushrooms in and about. Do your thing, go wild with it. So long as it's a circle, I'm happy. And I think that's the kind of the journey, the development from really basic, really kind of tonal colors through to that initial collection. And that was the thing that stuck, and I just can't get away from it. I think about mushrooms all the time.
Well, there is this one color that you posted recently for the Advent, I think. There was this electric blue, turquoisey kind of mushroom. I'm so obsessed with this color. Like I could wear like from underwear to the hat with this color and be very happy. So like, I think we're gonna talk about that particular color at some point. Tell me what made you decide to turn it into a business, because you started just dyeing yarn for yourself. Like, how did you decide, and did you need a business?
So when I actually in October pushed the button and said, now is the time, immediately my intention was that it was going to be a business. And I think the reason behind that thinking is I'm quite a nervous decision maker. And I will think about it for so long, and I will question it. And if I can't fully picture what the process is going to look like and how I'm going to feel doing it, then I probably won't do it, or I'll find another way to put it off. Which is why I kind of explained that experience and story. It needed to take something for me to go, actually, I need to just do this. And so I probably, since I started knitting in 2019, probably for very shortly after I started and was comfortable knitting, I knew that dyeing yarn was something I wanted to do. And so the only thing I needed to understand was, how was it going to happen? And applying it into a business model was how my brain put the pieces together to understand how it was going to function and how it was going to fund. I wanted it to fund itself. I wanted to learn a new skill, but I wanted it to be fulfilling and worthwhile with goals in mind. And I think to have it be in the context of a business, it means that you can apply metrics to it. You can understand, how is it growing? How am I developing? I look through my old pictures of the yarn I have dyed and the material that I've posted and shared, and I can look back and think, actually, I would probably do that differently now, or I would present that in a different way. And being able to measure that in the context of a business, I think, was really helpful for me in my mind to put it together in that way. So to come back to what you're asking, it was always the plan for it to be a business, and it was so that I could apply measurable goals and metrics, so that I can continue to develop it. I think I spent a long time looking for a hobby and something to do to occupy my time. And I think growing up, I was always creative. I always had something that I was doing, painting or clay, kind of modeling, pottery, but nothing stuck. And I think I was so grateful to have finally found knitting and the knitting community, which I'm sure we can talk about, being in knit groups and projects and things. But once I knew that that was my thing, I knew that I just needed more. And finding indie dyeing was such a gift, because it gave me a whole other skill tree to look up and figure out how it works and what to do. So yeah, I think I got there. I think I answered your question.
Well, let's talk about the knitting community, because very recently you had one devastating event, as far as I see it. And Instagram, you had an Instagram account that was nicely growing, and then Instagram just suspended it with no explanation and no reason. How did community come together to help you? Because I was like very impressed by, and I saw it accidentally because Martin, the Welsh tenor Knit 365 channel host, posted about it, and I was like, oh, I have to share it. What was
Yeah.
your experience with the knitting community in this situation?
So you're absolutely right. I think devastating completely covers it. To have the platform that the business ultimately exists on, my channel for getting my content out into the world, for that to be taken away so suddenly was gutting. I spent some time hoping that I would get it back, and I still am. I still am hoping that it comes back in some way. But we just have to wait. So, how did people come together? After waiting for some time, I had put a kind of crisis plan in place and knew that I wanted to reach out to a number of kind of key friends and businesses and other folks in the industry that I'd spoken to or worked with, so that I could reach as many people as possible. And I think what I didn't anticipate was that it caught on in the space of the weekend that I made a new Instagram account, and people were so kind to share the new profile. I had prepared some content beforehand, and I'd made a reel, and I'd made a couple of posts, a couple of pictures, and I posted them. And when I did post them, I thought, well, I'll be fine then, because people will like it, people will come in, they'll see it, and things will just be fine. But actually, I completely not registered or realized that I had no followers at that point. And so I posted a reel and some content, and it got nothing. And I describe it as just being in an empty room. And I'm over 3 years in at this point into building my brand and my business, and to have that feeling was completely alien. Having applied the knowledge and the skill and expertise that I had to find that in that moment nobody was there was bizarre. But it was overnight. It was the case that overnight, after one or two people had found out and shared, it just went through all of the followers, and more people shared it. And while it was difficult and upsetting, and it still is, I'm holding on to that it's I don't know what I'm going to do with so many things that I've planned for the upcoming future, for the near future. That weekend and that week following really restored my faith in the platform, because the people came together and made sure that the folks that needed to know or wanted to know definitely knew. So I can't thank those folks enough. I still, I'm taken away. My breath is taken away every time I see that someone else shares my account because they found out. And I think the difficulty with the algorithm, and what a lot of people talk about, is sometimes your account just isn't shared with other people. Like, you might be posting content all the time, but the people that follow you may not see it, because Instagram decides that they're not going to see it that day. So I think what was really heartbreaking was it wasn't as if there was an announcement that my account was gone. It just suddenly it was gone, and because of the way the Instagram algorithm works, people just may not know. People may not find out, and it may be weeks or months down the line. Maybe a follower of mine eventually thinks, "Hold on, I've not seen anything in a long time," and I've long moved on at that point, and they've no idea what's happened. So it's been wonderful. It's very much a current thing that's happening. And like I say, I just hold on to hope that somehow this works out in some way. So I just say thank you to everyone so far. And I'm currently working at about a quarter of the following that I had, but actually, in terms of a quarter of number of followers, I'm almost averaging at the same amount of engagement I had,
Right.
because these people that have come back to me are so ready to support me, and they're so ready to be right there and engage with what I've got. So I'm just so grateful.
It was also like at the worst possible time because you just were announcing the Advent calendar, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a product that we as dyers spend so long thinking about, contemplating, putting together. There's the initial idea, there's the thing that you want to focus on or revolve your colors around, there's the content branding around it, and then there's the promotion of it. I suppose it's another example that you've drawn out, that people have just been so supportive in the initial launch and release, that I'm just so chuffed. I'm so happy that people have decided to join me in this kind of massive project. It'll be the third Advent I've done, and I've learned a lot in the first two. The kind of first one was a very small concept. It was a kind of first. It was kind of me testing myself, and it was 13 minis, rather than a full 24, because I wanted it to be achievable. And I told a story through the colours of the Yule lads, in kind of Germanic folklore. And the idea was, through the colours, you would see that they kind of awaken at the top of a mountain and travel down into this warmly lit village at Christmas time to cause havoc. And it ended then with the kind of the coming of morning time. And that was the image I wanted to sell, to put across to people, in their minds as they were opening them up every day. And the second Advent I did was, I called it Dreamland, and I wanted to move through several kind of types of dreaming. So it was kind of things like daydreams, kind of blissful sleep, kind of nightmares, kind of lucid dreaming, and then awakening, and then eventually being awake. And so that was the kind of imagery I wanted to put across while I made those colors. And this year, I have since done my full rebrand. I'm committing to the mushroom fungi life, and these are based on mushrooms. So my main 24 mini skein Advent is themed on the fly agaric kind of toadstool, we would call it, mushroom. And it's going to travel through some lovely reds and oranges and beige tones. And there's an option for a main color scheme, as well as a kind of fluff fade if people want to hold it double. There's some gorgeous patterns and kind of ideas for projects where you hold kind of the fingering weight with the fluff. So all for that. And then I've got a second option, which is a kind of a weekly Advent. So it's kind of 4 skeins of 100 grams. And you've got the option then for some minis to be added along with those, kind of perfect for sock sets or hat knitting, or kind of faded projects with maybe some color pops. So I wanted something that kind of addressed 2 different types of project knitter. One that likes a big long fade, and then another that maybe likes some individual projects if that's what they'd like.
Well, when is this Advent is closing?
So I have had some options in terms of payment. So I've had some payment plans. They close this weekend. So as we're talking, It has been up for maybe a month and a bit at this point. So only for the fact that there needs to be a payment schedule, that's why I'm closing that now. But the actual Advent listings themselves, I think I'm going to try and keep them open as long as I can, especially now that they've been interrupted with the change in account. I think I'm going to keep them open as long as possible. And with that in mind, I'm going to try and keep them open maybe until July, and maybe push it until July, if not into August. I think I'll have an upper limit in terms of the amount that I'll be able to take on. But my work has started early on this one. I'm already speaking with some other businesses for some collaborations for it. I'm also putting a design towards it as well, so you'll get a design included. And I'm kind of ordering those bits and bobs in as the year goes on. So I would say July, August time, at the absolute latest. Get in touch as soon as you can if you're looking to order it later. But the sooner the better. I would say probably July would be the time.
I'm actually curious, like from the point of view of a dyer, does that make financial sense, and how much stress it puts on you to put together Advent? Because like you can just dye random colors at your own leisure, right? At your own schedule, without putting this commitment up front of you.
Yeah, Advents are a lot of work. But I think the first thing I would say to that is, personally with my dyeing, I love to tell a story, or I love to put a narrative across. And so it's actually something I've thought about a lot since having to restart my Instagram is, are there any changes that I'd like to put in place? And I think to focus more on a narrative and to tell more of a story, I think is something that I've wanted to do, but I think maybe I've been caught up in some of the other processes and been distracted. So I think the first thing that I get from doing an Advent calendar, I think, is being able to tell a story over many more colorways than someone might normally order at once. And so it means that I get to tell a story, and these lovely customers, these lovely knitters, crocheters, weavers, they get to come along with me as I tell that story, or I paint this picture. And so I think what's gratifying with that in mind is seeing what people do with it, because they have so many more colorways to play with. People put them together in configurations, kind of, they might marl the colors, they might hold 2 or 3 together at once, which pushes the colors all together in a much more concentrated finished fabric. Some of them might stripe them, so kind of just 1 to 24. Some of them might jumble them up. It's wonderful to see over so many more shades what people's creativity can do. But I think you're absolutely right. It's a lot of work, and certainly last year, what really wasn't helpful was I was in the middle of all of this work of dyeing, drying, packaging, kind of one after the other, and the UK postal system went on strike. And over the festive period, certainly I think it was maybe October, November, December, it was absolutely crippling, and it was really difficult to get those Advents out when my opportunity to get to the post office is limited, because I work full time as well as do this full schedule. I have a very short window to get to the post office, and so often it was closed or wasn't accepting packages, or if they were, they had no guarantee of when they would even leave that premises to get anywhere, you know? And so the longer those strikes went on, the worse the backlog got, and it was very difficult to provide any kind of update because they just didn't have one. And for a product that you put so much work into, to have that almost failure at the end, that people are wondering where they are, was really difficult. So certainly getting them out is a massive focus this year for me. Certainly strikes pending. I think these days it's very difficult to understand what's going to happen with the postal system, but I think I get to tell a story. I do put a lot of work in to do it, but I think you learn a lot every time you do it. So the first time that I did the little 13 Advent, I packaged them in a particular way, and so I was able to adjust that process for the second one. This year I'm going completely different again. From the lessons I've learned, I'm going to package them differently, present it in a different way. actually the presentation of this one is what I'm putting as a main focus and selling point, is that I want the packaging to be lovely, because it's not just the yarn product itself, it's how it's presented. And so that's a focus for this year. And that's a whole other side of the Advent experience. Is it's, you know, we talk about the yarn and the colorways and the bases and the projects, but actually it's what you're opening, you know, what is the actual physical packaging that you're holding in your hand
Right,
at
because it's like
Christmas
a
time
gift.
or at the festival
Yeah.
time. Yeah. And so that's what I'm trying to think about as well. There's so much to think about and to organize and source. And so there's the packaging, but then added to that, there's maybe extras. This year I want to include some little extras, some little goodies, some gift kind of things, like you say, that would be relevant to a maker, which is something else that requires thought and time and kind of contacts. And so basically I say all of this, but I'm loving doing it. So it is worthwhile for me. And profitability wise, ultimately that depends on the business. You know, it's up to you to value your time, and it's up to you to price your product appropriately. And I think within the industry, our customers understand that as well. I think there's an appreciation of the maker, the dyer, the crocheter, the knitter, the whoever it is. I think what we value most is our time, because we're spending it doing something we enjoy, and we understand there's value to that. And so I think it is worthwhile.
Well, when you mentioned me, like first talked about knitting, right? That's a hobby for you. And you do work full time. Is
Yeah.
dyeing yarn a hobby for you? Is it a passion for you? Is it obsession for you? What is it?
I think passion is the best word for it, because I think people, when they're passionate, are able to achieve a lot more than maybe they originally thought they would, or they could. I think there have been times where I've felt the crunch time wise, and that I felt like I've taken a lot on. And I think if I wasn't passionate about it, I don't think I could have managed at the time. Like with running any business, I think there are challenges, and there's kind of pitfalls and things that you need to adjust around and learn from. And so, like I mentioned about being able to measure success and growth, I think it's something that I think that only a passion for me is able to achieve. I think if it was simply a hobby, I think it may be something that would be very easy to put to the side. Just like I'm sure we do with our knitting projects sometimes. It's very easy to take one and go, you're gonna go over there for a bit. I think sometimes I describe it as I'm on the roller coaster and I can't get off now. I'm on it to stay.
Well, I know a lot of dyers who started it as a part-time gig, and then slowly as the business grew, they decided to actually quit their full-time job and become full-time dyer. Do you think that's in the future for you at some point?
I would like to, and people ask me that question quite often when I describe to them the amount of time that I spend doing it. Why don't you just do that full time? And actually, it's something that I've had to think about a lot and consider. And I actually find being a dyer quite lonely. It's a job, running a business by yourself, that you may not interact with anyone while you do it.
Right.
And so it would be a case if I would get up, I would go to the studio, dye the yarn all day. I might go to the post office and dispatch it. That might be the only person I see that day in relation to dyeing the yarn. So working full time is a conscious decision I'm making currently, because I think otherwise I may not get very much people interaction. I think I would describe myself as an introvert. I think I certainly get a lot of my energy from my own company. I enjoy that, and I think knitting is a great hobby for that. But what I've come to learn to enjoy and really cherish is actually that knitting brings people together. And so that's an absolute gift that knitting gives to me. But actually dyeing, not so much, because it's a process that's very kind of, I am the creative one that does it all. And I'm certainly not in a position yet where I can hire people. And I think the thought of having employees is quite intimidating at this point. Ask me again in 3 more years, I might feel differently and I might introduce you to my team. But I think at the moment, I find it quite lonely. And other than the events that I go to, and in Scotland, I think the calendar is a bit limited. It's maybe bottom heavy in terms of the end of the year. There's a lot of events, but near the start of the year, there's not so much. And it's actually something that I'm putting effort towards. I'm trying to book in trunk shows and in-person events that may not be a yarn festival, but are opportunities for me to reach out and meet people. I'm trying to bridge that gap. And so it's a process, and I think there's different working elements to it, but hopefully we get there. And I get that people interaction, because otherwise I think I'd be quite lonely and it'd be quite sad.
Well, you started with the rainbow colors. How many colors are now in your repertoire?
Oh, that's a test of my knowledge. I could have prepared that answer. You've caught me. I would say there's probably in the region of between 20 and 30 colorways that are in my repeatable range, that I know people enjoy and are popular and that I enjoy dyeing. I actually have a few here that I absolutely love. This is my teal woodcap fade. And so these are some of the shades that I absolutely adore. The kind of tealy
you're killing me
colors.
here, you know that, right? Like this is this is what my dreams are made of.
It started with this one. So this was the original kind of tealy color that I made. It's called Teal Woodcap, and you can see it there. It has some lovely, gorgeous, deep blue tones. But I speckle it with brown. Like so many of my colors, I include brown in it in some way, just because I find it as a neutral is really wearable. You can have cool browns as well as warm browns. I would personally say that brown can look good on anyone. I know that I get challenged on that, but I think I would love to have the opportunity to change people's minds. So it started with this one. This is the other end of it. So this is my mycelium colorway. It is a gorgeous neutral. I actually include the cool and the warm tones in it. So it has some lovely kind of grayer browns as well as the more nutty redder browns. So it means that it can complement either palette. And so I kind of wanted to bridge the gap between these two. And that's where the full fade came from. So I absolutely adore it. And they've become an absolute staple of what I dye now. If I go anywhere, I bring that fade, because I just love it.
Well, when people buy yarn, like I know that when I often buy like 1 or 2 skeins. It became like with recent years, I made it a point to buy 2 skeins each, because like most of the projects you can make, there are more variety of projects that you can make with 2 skeins of the same color. Do you try to put kits together? Is that like also part of your vision for the business?
Absolutely. Kits are really fun. Kits are a great way to, in a way, almost have that conversation with someone without talking to them. Because when you're at a yarn festival, a yarn show, people like to put colors together. People like to pick from one wall and pick from another wall and put things next to each other. Photographing and putting together different kits allows people to see ultimately what colors look like. And sometimes then dyers might suggest certain patterns. So they might put a kit together for a particular shawl or a particular hat or cardigan or whatever it would be. I have a lot of fade sets on my website, and I can't quite remember. I think I do make suggestions, but more than happy to, if anybody messaged me, to suggest all sorts of patterns. But actually work on my website is something that I'm trying to do at the moment. Kind of like what we mentioned with the whole Instagram thing. it's a real kind of sharp awareness that any kind of social media can be taken away from anyone at any point. And so those kinds of kits and suggestions and kind of conversations around what people can do with color is something that I really want to do a lot more. And so certainly in the next year, it's something I want to put a lot more focus into. So you're absolutely right. I love doing it.
Tell me about your day. Like, when do you do all of that? You come from work and you immediately running to the dye studio? Like, when?
Yeah, very much for this conversation. I have to run straight from work over to the studio. So I live in Glasgow. I work on one side of the city centre for my day job, and I then run straight across to the other side of the city centre for some dyeing in the studio. I think I'm known for not getting a lot of sleep. So I generally tend to work anywhere between the hours of kind of 5 p.m. and 5 a.m. And I would also say that I work a lot better at nighttime, whenever either people are asleep and I don't have the temptation to talk to, or just whenever there aren't any people in the building. I think I like it when I know that I'm alone and can get on with my process. I'm known to belt out a little Celine Dion every now and again, and it's good to know that maybe there isn't so much of an audience. But certainly it would be a nighttime thing, or the weekend, and so it's just wherever I can get a minute, really, to answer the question briefly. Wherever I can get a minute in the day, I do.
Okay, but then you're still a knitter. Like, when do you find a second to knit in all of that?
So I was really grateful to join a knitting group back when I learned to knit, and so I do have a couple of friends that I meet up with, maybe of an evening in a week or for a lunch over the weekend, and we'll bring our projects and we'll do knitting. What so often happens though is on WhatsApp we'll say let's meet for a knit, and actually what we'll meet for is a gin, and we'll bring the knitting, but we might not get very much knitting done. But sometimes the knitting happens. We sneak in a wee row or two. So that would be when. I think I enjoy knitting most when I'm with other people doing the same thing, because you get that lovely chat, you get that lovely kind of what are you working on? I'm working on this, and you get to kind of compare notes and see what we're up to. So with other people, I think is the best way for me that I like to knit.
Well, you mentioned that you were learning knitting and the basics of the yarn dyeing on YouTube. Do you find the other dyers to be more of colleagues, competition? Do you learn from them? Do they share knowledge with you? Or is it like cutthroat business?
I think the first thing I would say is that the majority of us wouldn't see it as a cutthroat industry at all. I think just with knitting and crafts, we are so supportive of each other. I know that there are so many other businesses that I've had help from and guidance from and still do, to ask questions. There's another dyer even in the building that we ask questions to and get feedback about events from, and talk about supply of different yarns, or kind of the packaging options, and it's kind of any aspect of running a business, someone else has already done it. So it just makes so much sense to pull on each other's knowledge. There's, other than actually directly speaking to other dyers, there's dyer Facebook groups, there's groups on Slack and Instagram that I've been a part of, and I've had benefit from, not only from kind of asking questions and getting answers for myself, but I think we all like to chip in every now and again and answer a question or two, and it means then that we can pull the knowledge all together. I've had some wonderful friends that have helped me, other dyers, and long may it continue.
Well, what's your like absolute favorite thing about having a dyeing business, and what's your least favorite thing about it?
Um, Least favorite thing. The first thing that comes to mind is having to wear rubber gloves. I really don't like wearing gloves.
I didn't expect that. I was thinking some paperwork, something.
Yeah, I like to have a bit of a natter and a bit of I get on a bit of a soapbox sometimes, but that was the first thing that came to mind. Least favorite thing. I think I do feel a lot of pressure whenever I have a lot on the dye schedule. I think it's very easy for me to feel overwhelmed with a lot on. But actually, I think that's why I get a lot of benefit from working at nighttime, because when everyone else is asleep and I have very little distraction that way, it's a lot easier for me to put to-do lists together. So love a to-do list to get a lot of work done. In fact, I know that I have a lot of things to do at the minute. I've been so lucky to get some lovely wholesale orders from some businesses in the US actually. And I know that I have quite a shopping list of colorways to dye for them. So that's an example of kind of to do, put a date on it, boom, 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 get all the way through those colorways. So least favorite, I think sometimes the workload can be quite a lot, which I'm grateful for because I think it's an indication that things are going well. I think most favorite thing I think would be vending at yarn festivals and being in person and having that interaction with folks whenever they actually get to kind of hold the yarn and talk to me about it, and when people show up and they've got something knit in my yarn that they've bought and that they've spent their time knitting. I just, it blows my mind that someone has taken something that I've made with my own hands and has spent 40, 50, 60 hours making a gorgeous cardigan, and that they're pleased to wear it. I just not, I couldn't ask for more.
Are you like ever surprised at what people make with your yarn?
I know that a friend of mine has knit a gorgeous cardigan. It's by Andrea Moire, and the name is escaping me. It uses 4 colors and it's in DK, and it's got a kind of a shawl collar. And I'm gonna really
like Find Your Fade or something like that.
I know, it's like that, but for a cardigan. Right. And it's escaping me the name. But she asked for colors specifically to do it in, and so I gave her the colors, and to see it knit up was just mind blown moment. I was like, I just can't believe that my hands made those colors. It's just amazing to see. So yeah, absolutely. It's a crazy thought that I'm so lucky to have people spend time with my product. So
well, if you guys thought that fade set that John showed us was amazing, just go on his site and see what else he got there, because your mind will be blown. Like, brilliant colors. I love seeing your posts. I love seeing the colors. I love those mushrooms because I didn't even know mushrooms like this exist. So you like opening my universe in whole other dimension. Thank you so very much for sharing your time with me. And I hope you guys all go and follow him on Instagram and say hello from Fiberchats.